Who do you think is the best comedian of all time?
Oh, that's a great question. Greatest of all time.
You mentioned Carlin. Your uncle's liking Carlin.
Well, Carlin is great. Carlin is really hard to argue with, but Chappelle is also really great. Louis C.K. is really great. I don't know that there's what Joan Rivers is great. I don't know. You smile at that, but
Well,
she's a beast of a comic.
I'm not aware of her stand-up,
She's
actually.
a beast of a comic. Ask Rogan, ask any of them. Kinnison's great.
So
Bill
what
Hicks
makes
was
a
great.
great comic, do you think, in the history of comedy? Just like
Said something at the moment in a way, found a way to communicate with people in the funniest possible way at that moment, and illustrated larger truths about life in what they did. And I think that guys like Louis and Chappelle and Pryor and Kinnison and Hicks, people like Joan Rivers, have done that. And even, modern people like Maria Bamford's an amazing comedian. It's just a different style of comedy per se, but she's an amazing comedian. Cat Williams is an amazing comedian. He really is.
Does he have any? Well, see, one of the things you kind of mentioned, the comedians you mentioned, they were kind of fearless in saying the difficult thing that needs to be said. Cat Williams is more. I don't remember his comedy, but I think it's just more wild out there.
Well, to an extent, but you can watch it. He's got stuff. He talks about stuff. He talks about race brilliantly. He talks about America brilliantly. No, I think there's a lot of stuff there.
And of course, Chris Rock.
Chris Rock, of course. Yeah. It's so hard. You can't really pick one. You just gotta. There's a class of people that throughout this history of this business, which is not that long of a history, it's pretty much within the last century, that have been really influential. Sometimes it's style, the way they deliver things. Sometimes it's substance of how they, what they're saying, or sometimes it's just a style of what they're saying. I mean, and we're only talking about stand-up comedians, right? Yeah. So there's a million great comedians. I mean, if we're going to talk about Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler and Chris Farley, I mean, these are brilliant. And those guys are bigger influences on comedy, I think, than stand-ups, really, truly. So there's so many brilliant people in the business.
Who was for you like influential? Just early on.
Hicks was influential because I'd watch Bill Hicks and I'd be like, this guy's saying crazy shit on stage, and this is the only way he can get away with it is because it's so funny. And he was calling out like, the military-industrial complex, and he was talking about the first Gulf War. I remember he said a joke that I heard, it made me sit up straight. He goes, he was in Canada and he said, we had a war in the States. He was talking about the first Gulf War. And he said, I was in the unenviable position of being for the war, but against the troops. And to me, I love that joke. It was so funny to me. And I was like, oh, you can't get away with that anywhere other than standing on a stage. You could never say that in an office, really. And this was before it was like PC and this and the other thing. I always knew that comedians had to say shit and have it be funny enough that you couldn't get away with it in polite society. That was the whole point. That was why it was a dark theater or a dark nightclub. That's why people had a few drinks. That's what the art form was. And that's why. So a guy like that was influential because I started watching him. And then, of course, I loved SNL when I was a kid, and I would watch Chris Farley, and I would watch, people like even John Belushi going back in the day, but I'd watch Adam Sandler and Will Ferrell and all these guys. I mean, there's so many funny people, but Bill Hicks was kind of funny. And then Patrice O'Neill was probably my favorite comedian who's made me laugh more than anybody else.
I think it was you actually that maybe on your podcast we're talking about Patrice O'Neill and that he was actually vicious to others.
I think he was a little mean to other people, but he was very good to people that he liked, I guess. I think he was he wasn't, and I've never met him. I have no inside info. But from what I've heard, he was no nonsense guy, right? He just said what he wanted to say. But I think in terms of comedians, I don't know of anyone funnier than Patrice O'Neill who said in modern times that said more about our society than him. I mean, he was just a brilliantly funny guy. On the radio, he was funny. On his specials, he was funny. Everywhere, he was funny.
And there's something else to be said about the whole medium of comedians doing podcasts. Yeah, because it unlocks a weird, special new thing that changed everything. I mean, Rogan started with that. Yeah, you're doing that. I think that's a whole nother form of stand-ups. Yeah, the ones that have a lot to say, almost we get to witness the process of the creation of the jokes in a way, or the mind, right? The sort of the evolution of the mind behind the jokes, which is.
comedians were late to social media. Comedy's it's a performance-based medium. So it's about getting up and doing it, getting up in a club, getting up in a theater, getting up in a bar, getting up wherever you can get up. And comedy for years was about performance. Mm-hmm. And then on the higher end, it was about movies and TV shows. But we were very slow to get on YouTube. We were very slow to adapt to technology. We were very slow to monetize anything we did on the internet. Yeah. So podcasting was a way for comics and funny people to kind of get into that space, start earning money. And now, because of the pandemic, it's really become essential. And it helps you. And even without the pandemic, it was where people were, it was how you were building a fan base. And that's like, but comics were very reticent to embrace social media at all because they thought it was cheap and they didn't like it. And they thought the people on it were idiots and were unfunny. And it was just a blatant, whatever it was, whether it was a money grab or it was just too commercial and in a sense where they're like, hey, look at me. Like it was just goofy, right? And then comics, I think, got displaced because all the YouTubers came in and all the social media stars came in and they really knocked comics off. Because now people are much more like if you ask anyone under 30 who their favorite comedian is, they say David Dobrik. And there's nothing wrong with that. David's a funny guy. But like what not especially to me a ton, but that's okay. I don't, but he makes people laugh. So he's funny. But he's what people, that's a comedian now. So comics got beat by other people coming into a digital space before they did, laying the groundwork and taking it over. Mm-hmm. And now comics are just trying to stay alive. Like even my podcast, which is people really like it, thank God. And I love doing it.
The Tim Dillon Show.
Well, thank you. I was late. I've been podcasting for a long time, but really dedicating myself and putting the resources behind it. I was late to it. Like I was like, hey, I'm telling jokes on stage, which is great, but I should have been allocating more time to building an infrastructure online. And I wasn't doing it. And a lot of comics weren't doing it. Funny comics weren't doing it. Mm-hmm. Comics that should be doing it. And I think when the pandemic ends, a lot of comics will just keep doing live stand-up, but I will keep. Obviously, I'm going to go back on the road and do live stand-up, but I will keep doing this podcast and building digitally too.
But you're also exploring ideas. You're doing like short videos and so on. You're trying to look for different mediums of how I want to be funny
everywhere. I want to be funny everywhere. I love making things too. My producer, Ben Avery, is like a brilliant editor and comedic mind, even though he's not a stand-up. Mm-hmm. He's able to, he understands funny. He understands what makes me funny. We're able to make these really, some of those videos, they're just brilliant little videos, even though they're tiny little videos, they're fucking as funny as anything. Yeah. And it's not me, it's me working with somebody else to make something really great. Yeah. And it's that relationship that's very important.
Well, in some sense, the medium of a short video is a challenge, just like the medium of a short tweet. Of course. How to say something, whatever the flavor is of what's in your heart, what's in your mind, how to say it, whether it's the goal is funny or something, or just express an idea.
I think it's the whole thing that's important to us is that it's an extension of your friendship in a way. Like, are you guys laughing at it? Right. Are you guys making each other laugh about this idea? Yeah. And if that's the case, other people are going to laugh at it. I think so much of the old medium was like everything was top down. Mm-hmm. Okay, pitch me this idea. I pitch it to the showrunner. They pitch it to the network. They pitch it to this, to that, to the, standards and practices, sales, and we got to go through everything. Now it's just like, are me and a few buddies, or even just one buddy, laughing at this idea? Does it captivate us? And do we see it visually? And also a great line from Roseanne, a guy, not Roseanne, but a guy that worked on Roseanne. Mm-hmm. The old Roseanne, the great one. He said, is it funny with the sound off?
Right.
That's what we try to do.
That's brilliant.
Is it funny with the sound off? When you see me in the Dumb Things, or me in the Meghan McCain, or me in the Thing, is it funny with the sound off? And if it's funny with the sound off, you have a good starting point. That's
hilarious. Because I would say you're one of the people, because most people are not funny with the sound, or most comedians. Like you, Will Ferrell's another example of that. Yeah. There's something about when I click on one of your videos, it's funny, just like the first thing I see, just your face.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet. But thank God. That's what we try to do, right? We're trying to be funny.
Yeah.